Okay, so I think that's live. Just give it a few seconds to make sure I can see some folks join before we click off. Okay, looks like the stream is live. I can see folks joining. We'll give it just another 30 seconds, let people connect in, and then we'll kick this off. There we go. If you're joining, say hi. Let us know that the audio and the videos are all working properly before we get 45 minutes into it. Someone says one of us is not coming through. Hi, Mark. Ryan, Andrew, another Mark. Awesome. Right, so we'll kick off then. So thank you very much for those that are joining us live for the Fox Community Q&A. This is our fourth Q&A, kindly attended to by Craig from Fox. Quick intros for those, because the group has grown by about 2,500 members, combination of both customers and installers on the group since we last did a Q&A a quarter or so ago. So my name is Will Eccles. I run the Facebook group along with the other moderators, as well as the Fox Community Forum. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Craig Williston from Fox. Hey Craig, tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, so I'm Craig. I'm the Service Director at Fox in the UK. I also oversee various other departments, including being the liaison for HQ for product development and feeding back what the market wants. In addition to that, I run the installer program as well, training. So yeah, have a finger in a few pies, shall we say.
That's great. Thanks again for joining. This is a really great opportunity to get updates on all things Fox ESS. And also we have a segment for the community questions and answers. So those who have submitted questions using the link in the group, great. If you think of something whilst Craig is giving us updates, feel free to interact. So we're broadcasting on YouTube, so if you could use the YouTube chat, I'll try and keep an eye on that and ask Craig any impromptu questions, but we're also going to try and get through as many of your questions that you submitted earlier. So with that, Craig, is big European events just happening in Birmingham at the NEC for solar and storage. I saw the Fox stand there. Any updates, any takeaways or product updates that you want to share?
Yeah, so we obviously exhibit annually at that show. It's the biggest show of its kind in the UK, so we're pretty prominent in terms of our presence at that show. We used it as a launch pad for several new products, which we'll probably talk about as we go through in a little bit more detail. But primarily, the big launch was our new all-in-one single-phase system, the Power Cube. Alongside that, we had sort of soft launches of a few of the products. So we've got a new three-phase grid-tied inverter called the V series. We showcased a new commercial scale 200 kilowatt hour storage unit called the G-Max as well, which is a next year launched in terms of stock on the ground, but we gave that its first airing, if you like. We also introduced the new H3 Smart model, which will take over from the H3 ultimately. And we also spoke about our new EQ batteries, new variants of the Energy Cube, if you like, which are primarily developed for use with the Power Cube, but will also be available to use with conventional H1, K series, H3, and the rest. So those were the main sort of products that we showcased there, alongside the range as it is. So quite a lot new this time round. The show went well. As you're aware, Fox, beginning part of 2024, became the largest supplier of solar and storage products into the domestic market in the UK, having been sort of second, third place throughout 2023. So there's been a big increase in market share to be at the point now where we have the largest market share of any manufacturer in our sector. So that obviously is great, but it's also creating challenges, problems, bottlenecks, and the other things that come along with that. So yeah, so we obviously had a conversations with a lot of our because primarily it's a trade show. So there were, and I did meet a few actually. I think I met one or two that said they were active on this group, but primarily we were talking to distributors, installation companies, that sort of thing, and that was the focus.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, if I heard correctly, the energy cube. Could you explain a bit more about what that is? That's
The
not a
power cube.
storage device. Power cube. Sorry. What is that, Craig?
That's an all-in-one single phase system so think of an energy cube, think of a stack, and then just think of an inverter on top. Um, so I don't have we not put anything out yet. I think there's quite a bit of marketing about to go out on that imagery. So it can use existing ECS batteries. So you can basically you have an inverter with the BMS built in. There's basically a spacer, an adapter, and then you have your stack. So with this system, it stacks vertically. There's no need for a master battery. There's just slave batteries because the BMS is inside the inverter. Primary driver with it is outdoor installations because we've developed it in such a way that the new battery variants that will be offered with it. There's an EQ 2900 and an EQ 4300 will have built-in heaters. So they'll have cold weather protection built in, along with fire suppressants built in, and the overall system will be IP66 as well for added sort of ingress protection. And on top of that, there's a few other things. There's going to be a longer warranty on it. Probably it's not what everyone wants to hear because the people in this session now have already bought their system, I guess. But uh, there may be some installers that obviously aren't aware of it yet. So the Power Cube, yeah, that's our big launch. That's actually going to be available fairly soon. It's just a pending certification before we release it. But in terms of stock on the ground, it's likely to be towards the end of next month, beginning of December, when we actually start to send them out.
Oh, brilliant. And you say about existing customers, but there's a fair number of customers who have the sort of legacy all-in-one system, that
Yeah,
uses the HV 2600 sideways. Four of those, I think I see a fair number of customers of that system outgrow it very quickly and go, how do I get more? And realize that, well, actually, that's the maximum capacity of that unit.
yeah,
There's a strong secondary market for HV 2600 batteries as well. So
yeah,
noticed, especially recently, a lot of people trading up and going from that sort of older architecture towards the EP range and things like that. So the ability, and that's the all-in-one as a metal chassis. You put that outside on the darkest, coldest winter days. You're going to see some performance degradation whilst it's being deep frozen overnight. So to see those EQ range of batteries that are cube, they're indiscernible from a cube externally. I imagine the looks
yes,
of them,
yeah. You wouldn't
having
notice.
those having that heater and now the inverter master BMS all in one unit that drops onto the top. Is that a hybrid unit then? So will you be able to connect your solar directly to that, or is it we use the
Yeah,
AC
yeah.
coupling?
So both, yeah. So it can operate as both. So it's got DC inputs. Cable. It's all hidden. So there's no exposed inputs or any exposed cabling at all. It's a fully enclosed unit. No screen on it. So it is going to require the new local mode feature on the app in order to commission and and configure. So yeah, because I accept that the original all in one, one of the limitations was the ability to expand. There was kind of capped at a level that some people wanted to go beyond. Also, it was bigger. Um, so this is because it's cube scale. You're not going to be taking up a huge amount of space, and there's obviously the added advantage of um, IP66. So there's a drive, isn't there, anyway, generally within the industry to move outdoors for installations for loads of sort of compliance regulatory reasons. So that it's kind of been developed with that in mind, and with a 15-year system warranty as well. So So that's it's imminent release. It's not something that I'm talking about that you're not going to see for months. It is happening. There's things coming. Out of the box, you can work. You could put it on top of an existing stack of energy cubes. But the EQ, like I said, the EQ29s, EQ43s, but specifically those initially will have the added function of um, heating, for those that want to protect against cold weather. In addition to that, just very finally before we get into the questions, the EPs, newer EP batteries, from the end of this year will also have that warm weather protection built in as well. So that will that
Wow.
will that will eventually go across the range and be universal.
So you're standardizing, by the sounds of it, on the fire suppressant
Yep.
abilities, because the EPs have got those as well. I
Yep.
understand,
Yeah.
and now that having that battery heating capability. When we say heating, we mean like a warming effect, right? To
Yes.
just keep them within their operating range.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's always going to be a trade-off. The fact you're using a bit of energy to warm them. So, but I mean, for a lot of people, that's a trade-off they're willing to make, because if rate of charge for a lot of customers is key, especially if they're utilizing time of use charging, octopus, whatever it might be. So yeah, so it'll be something you can deactivate. If you don't want it, um, it won't be used, won't be utilized. But yeah, so um, it's imminent, and then we're in the process now of doing some tests, to put it through its paces. So that's ongoing before we hit the market with it.
So the other thing I've noticed on the newer generation of hardware that seems to be standard now is the parallel functionality, which I use
Yeah.
myself, and I know a number of customers have had parallel installations. Is that something that's also standard for this Power Cube system, or is it designed as an all-in-one, as an only one?
There will be a parallel function. What we're being a bit cautious on that, because it may require some software tweaks, in order for that to become a feature that we sort of promote. Um, as you know, and as a lot of people watching this will know, when a product's first launched, there's obviously, the real world testing is obviously somewhat different to the lab testing, and we're just making sure that we don't you know go too big too soon on it. It's not a mistake we want to make. So there is there will be the facility to parallel, yes, but I don't want to say too much about it at the minute, because there's still some work to be done on that.
Absolutely. And the other thing that caught my eye, which that it is, there's a few data sheets out there now, is the grid scale G series. I think it's called that. Is it
Gmax, yeah.
G Max? What's the strategy behind that? Is that sort of a, what do they call it, a gigapack or megapack Tesla sort of competitor? The idea at grid scale, who would buy that type of product?
So it will compete in that market. I mean, so the idea with the Gmax is each unit is 200 kilowatt hours, and you can't change that. It's not adjustable. You can't, it's 200 kilowatt hours, but you can parallel that up to 10. So it scales to 2 megawatt hours. It's AC coupled only. Okay, so it's an AC unit. Um, would routinely go in alongside, conventional inverters, for your PV. Um, so there's a big market for that. I mean, we've only just really started to talk about it, and we're getting a lot of interest already. Um, the modular nature of it is compact in its own enclosure. It's not fully IP65, but its protection is enough that it could go in an outdoor setting with if it was sheltered. People like the scalability of it, and basically the simplicity of it. This thing is you forklift this thing in, you connect it up, and that's it. It's good to go. So um, again, that one, more than some of the other products I've mentioned that we kind of soft launched at the show, is a bit further down the line. And the simple reason for that is, as a company, we launch things into different markets at different points, and there will be a release into some European markets ahead of the UK. Sometimes we get to the front of the line, sometimes we're a bit further down, but um, it's developed. It's there's installations already globally. It's just a case really of just phasing that in the UK. Again, lots of things hoops we have to jump through in terms of getting a product to market, not least that certification and compliance and everything else. So that's all work in progress. So
Yeah.
yes, so that would typically go in alongside an R series, our R series inverter on the PV side, and there will be a central software EMS that will bring everything in together for overall system control and monitoring. There's also a separate monitoring platform that will be developed for that for utility scale stuff as well. So there's a lot of work to do on that yet before that's proper market ready.
Perfect, and that's it's the 200 kilowatt hours is, I mean, that's not residential anymore. That is three-phase commercial. You're a factory owner,
Yeah,
probably with a roof full of solar, and you've got heavy motor driven type use cases that are using a lot of power. It's your, because the H3, the H3 Pro, they're aimed at sort of small commercial, aren't they? And then going into, if you are a large facility, having, I mean, 2 megawatt hours worth of storage is huge. So it makes sense that you've got the whole market now, right from that a very small string inverter like the S series, all the way up to this G Max unit with hundreds of kilowatt hours of storage and everything in between. Plus, you've mentioned previously about energy management systems, heat pumps. There's anything to do with energy storage consumption. Seems like you've got a finger in every pie right now.
it seems that way. Yeah, that was the aim really was to cover the market fully. Um, and yeah, so going into it made sense to go in that direction. We have the H3 Pro, which scales quite nicely with the parallel installations and obviously the dual battery stack. So we were getting into sort of medium-sized commercial with that, but obviously this takes us up a notch. And exactly like you said, you sort of industrial complexes, buildings, and that sort of thing. Factories, perfect for them. Yeah,
Absolutely. Um, I think while we're talking about products, both a product and a question at the same time, if I just bring it
yeah,
up,
sure.
there was any update on the micro inverters? We saw a little bit, heard a little bit about it a few months ago, and it was a bit of a staggered launch whilst you were working the software side out. But how do things stand today?
Yeah, so the microinverters have been coming soon since forever. It seems. I actually had a conversation today that said that these will be relaunched this year. Okay, we're at the point now where it's simply a case of they're fully certified, they're good to go. It's getting stock on the ground. Um, Bit of testing internally here before that, but yeah, this year for sure. They're already being used and installed in Europe. So um, there was a bit of a departure for us, the microinverter. So we wanted to make sure it was thoroughly tested, and it suited us in the UK, to be honest, that the European arms of the business got to have them first because they could iron out the kinks and make sure it was all good to go. So yeah, that, as I'm told, I'm led to believe is all good. We're ready to launch, so it will be before the end of the year.
Right, and if you're a customer thinking about adding small scale solar array, there's still the S series string inverter, which has very low startup voltage. If you're on that sort of 2 to 3 panel, I'll put a little bit on the corner of that garage. There is a solution today, but obviously the micro inverter is both for small, because you can go down to even one panel, correct? But then have two per micro inverter.
Yeah, so it's a dual panel microinverter. You don't necessarily have to have two panels. You can basically just cap off effectively one input. So it's dual MPPT microinverter. Um, so even if you've got one per two panels, each panel is still individually tracked and optimized because it's independent trackers in there. Yeah, I mean, the two panel example, you can use an S series, but obviously you've got a circa 50 volt startup. This is a 24-volt startup. So if you've got that two panel array and you want to utilize that a little bit of roof space, then it would make sense. You're going to get a wider generation window using a microinverter than you would an S series, whether it's our mini S series or the equivalent ones from other manufacturers. You obviously, which will work, but this will provide a greater yield, particularly in low light conditions and stuff like that.
Absolutely. We did talk about the grid scale pieces. Someone's got to ask me a question about are there any UK projects that are being supported by this hardware yet, or is that not quite yet?
Yeah, it's difficult to answer that question, to be honest, because what we don't have is at Fox is a direct relationship with the grid. We kind of do, but we do it through third parties. So there are grid projects, if you want to term it like that, that are in that are being planned involving Fox, but there is another entity that sits in between us and the grid. So we're working with third parties for those sort of schemes. A lot of them are under NDA, and I can't really name anything, but yeah, so that's happening, but we're not directly interfacing with National Grid DNOs or anything like that on that front.
At least not yet, right?
No,
And
not yet. Yeah, just
it's always a
add
when,
to the
right?
workload. Yeah, So we're not yet. Is probably there are. Yeah, I can't really say too much, but anyway.
No worries. I think this question's coming from as a collection of customers and users of FoxKit. We're using the PV. There's a data collection site called, is it PV Output, something like that. And so we've created a virtual team. We've got hundreds, if not thousands, of Fox customers streaming their data through their Home Assistant integrations to this, so we can visualize at least the UK impact on how we're contributing as a community, as a sort of unofficial virtual power plant. And obviously, I think there's an element of pride in the amount of generation we have as a group already, and how many megawatts we're producing, or probably even gigawatts by now, towards the UK grid. That combined with, eventually, if you can share anything about how we're Fox are involved in grid scale operations and renewables, etc. I think there's quite a few people that are very focused on the economics and the eco side of how they're contributing in a way, not necessarily just their own self-use, but how they give back. So we can at least see some of this now. So if you're listening to this and wondering, oh, I'd like to see that, I'll put a link in the description of the video once it's ended on how you can set your system up to submit your data to this, and how to join the team so you can recognize our team's performance. We are competing with a few other UK based folks, like I think Give Energy have got a group as well. So we'd like to win first place there by getting all that data and all your generation into there. So it's a fun little project we're doing.
I'll be interested in that myself. Actually, I wasn't aware of that.
Yep, no, absolutely. I'll send you the details.
Perfect.
Probably the most talked about is around firmware. So to ease you in, Craig, about firmware, release notes front, because all firmwares are a little bit of mystery right now. Have you had any updates from the team on that?
Right. So there's one question that will come up in every session that it will come up on the next one, I reckon. I'm fighting, and there's an internal debate about this that doesn't seem to ever get resolved. I'll be totally honest with everybody, and just outline what that discussion looks like, because I see the point that people are making, and not least the impact it has on us in the service team. Because we invite people, you want a firmware upgrade, we'll do it for you, not a problem. Email us and we'll do it. So you can imagine. I think we had 9,000 in the last 12 months firmware update requests that were sent to us that we had to deal with ourselves. So, from my perspective, having firmware release notes published that say you don't need this firmware upgrade, because this firmware upgrade, what it does is it adds a country code to the inverter's settings, or it's very minor data handling logic issues that have just been tweaked, whatever it might be. The response I get is that there's a reluctance to do this because the argument that will be made from HQ is, well, actually, unless there is a major feature change that requires a firmware upgrade, for example, changes to the mode scheduler and things like that were rolled out, then why do we need to publish this? Firmware updates shouldn't really be routinely applied every time there is an update, for the reasons I've just given, and the they don't necessarily want to share the details of every firmware upgrade and every down to the minutiae of what actually it's doing. So what we're trying to do is have a middle ground where we make available publicly summarized release notes. Okay, so they don't have to go into granular detail about everything, but just give people a broad sense of what that firmware update does or what it doesn't do, and that's what we're working on. So it will happen because we will make it happen. But the reasons for the delays is that there has been this internal discussion. That discussion is happening alongside a whole host of other stuff that's on people's wish lists. There's hundreds of things, some of which will come up in the conversation as we go through it. And we have to set priorities, and we have to. For some people, I understand this is important. This is a priority. Why don't you do this? And people will say, well, in other sectors with other forms of technology, it's routine. Why a Fox not doing? I'm not aware actually if some of our competitors do it. I don't think they do. Some might, some don't. But yeah, rest assured, it's not that we're ignoring the request. It will happen. There's just a discussion about the format that will take. So we'll keep chipping away at that. So the question,
no,
yeah,
that
again,
makes sense. It's a little bit chicken and the egg because I can see people's views going, oh, so they know there's a change, and what does that change entail? Because should they upgrade? And I think you answered it really well when this was slightly the same question, slightly differently worded, one or two of the Q&As before in terms of when should I update? And like you say, a lot of the updates are unnoticeable or it don't even apply to say the UK market. And it's not like an iPhone app where you do chase updates because there's normally big features. The biggest feature probably that I can think of over the years of ownership is the scheduling mode and able to force discharge. So that's really one big thing that that you would actually use. Everything else are supporting app features and just small things behind the scenes. So like you say, the product is shipped with a fully functional, fully certified piece of software, and over time features may become improved or added, but there isn't the rush to be on. And sometimes the newest firmware includes little surprises that aren't always positive or require further work. So things like that. So does that summarise it well as well in terms of if you're one version old, don't panic. Everything will still work for you, and the new version might not even do anything for you. And I think because the changes aren't summarised or displayed, there's a bit of fear of missing out type mentality, I suppose, is fair.
I think that's definitely the case. I think it ties into another question that probably you'll lead into about firmware, user-controlled firmware updates.
That's the next one, yeah.
So
yeah.
That's something again, because ahead of this session, I had another conversation with the dev team about that. Now, there's two things here. There's two issues. One is the work needed to make that doable, given that there is a really long to-do list on the development side, and issues to resolve. Issues that may even get raised here. So that's the first thing. The second thing is so the idea was pitched was, well, look, what we say is within the app you can just like you can in with many many of the electric devices or apps generally, check for update. There is an update available for your device. One click update. Okay, makes sense. We've got to weigh that against what we've just discussed. Often those updates aren't required. Now, if we crunch the numbers here, if we say, let's say there's 1 million end users globally. Okay, let's say there's 800,000 of people using the app. For argument's sake, I'm putting numbers out the air, but they're not too far away, to be honest. And there's 3 to 4 updates a year on average. You're then potentially seeing several million firmware updates rolled out, the vast majority of which do nothing at all. And there is also a small chance on a firmware update that the comms are lost and there is a failure. Now, normally that wouldn't be a problem because it wouldn't apply the firmware update, and you go back to its previous state if there was a loss of comms during the transfer of data. But in a small number of cases, it can be a problem. So even if you say 0.1% of the 3 million plus unnecessary firmware updates that get rolled out, using up server resource, various other things, cause the inverter to fall over during that process. So in terms of assessing the risk of opening up firmware updates to everybody, you can see where I'm going with this. We have to try and mitigate that risk of doing that. We have to then look at the alternative to that is we carry on as we are, which is A, not producing firmware release notes, and B, having to handle internally here several thousands of firmware update requests annually that we have to then have our own sort of team resource to actually apply. So there is an issue here that needs to be ironed out internally before we make that available. However, when I last pitched this with the dev team, which was earlier this week, they were coming on board with it. They were coming on board with it because obviously, when I explained to them the level of resource it requires in order to handle these requests, it kind of, changed their focus a little bit. So again, as is the case with the previous question, it's work in progress. What I'm not saying to people is I'm not going to put a date on this. I'm not going to say you'll have this by December, you'll have this by January. It will happen, and it will likely happen at a point at which the level of work and the to-do list generally is a lot shorter than it is now. It's not going to be rushed through. It's, from our perspective, probably not what people want to hear. It's not a priority. And that's just me being honest. There's other things that take priority right now. So a long-winded answer to that, Will, but I'm just trying to illustrate the commercial. It seems like a very easy thing to implement from the outside, but actually it's a lot more difficult because there's a lot of things for us to consider.
I suppose would it be fair to say that there isn't a firmware update that you're aware of that fundamentally changes the performance of the product? So if you're one or two versions behind, or even on the version that you're installed on, there isn't a version that's like, oh, if you install this update, you're going to be getting 20 to 30% more solar rays converted into power into your, like, that's not the firmware updates are minute things, tweaks, additional compliance settings, some algorithms for the batteries, some extra features like with the scheduling support. But there's not a fundamental. Your product won't be a significantly better performing product with firmware from what you've seen of the updates. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say, and I think the main one that you've already referenced was obviously a significant change in terms of functionality with control and time of use charging. So I understood why that one was quite popular and we had lots of demands for it. That's fair enough. There's been a couple of others that can have performance issues, but they don't apply to the vast majority. So I'll give you an example. There was a firmware update where we managed to lower the startup voltage on the single phase products, which only really impacted on those people that had 3-panel arrays or 3-panel arrays with panels with very low VOC. So that was an example of a firmware update that did potentially, for a very small number of customers, have performance benefits. But so that would be something that we would do on request. When those issues come in and they're identified, and that's something we communicate out, or we should do. And there's probably installers looking at this saying, "No, we didn't get that memo," but that was something we'd roll out to installation partners. They'd be aware of it. So if they, they ought to be monitoring their systems, having conversations with customers. It's an example of one firmware update that did potentially have a small performance benefit, but it was probably only 1%, 2% of the user base. So for the most part, you're absolutely right. There's no gain to be had in terms of performance from these updates.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying, Craig. I hope that makes sense to all the folks dialed in. There's quite a few. So just for folks that are watching this thing, and I submitted a question. I've taken all the questions. You can imagine we've got 7,500 users. There's a lot of duplication. There's a lot of different ways of phrasing questions. So if you don't recognise your exact question, don't panic. I'm trying to get as much information out of Craig as possible, getting through as many of your questions, plus the ones that I can see that are coming in ad hoc on the comments. Try to get to those, but I'm trying to sort of dedupe as many questions as possible. So there's been a lot of questions and comments around error messages, validation messages being confusing in the app. We quite often see a screenshot saying, invalid data, things like that. Is there a drive to make messages and the experience cleaner and clearer?
Certainly, I think we're seeing a lot of incoming inquiries to do with this issue. It's difficult actually because I mean I see some of the incoming tickets and emails. I also have visibility, obviously, of your group, and I do dip in now and again and have a look. I don't respond as often as probably I should, but it does open up a can of worms sometimes. So, but I do see the feedback. The difficulty we have at the moment is there seems to be a lot of noise, and often if you take an individual case, actually when you look into it, there's not really a problem. It's a configuration issue, which is a problem because if we made it clear in terms of how you configured these systems, then that issue wouldn't arise. So it's trying to sort out the issues which are the result of user input to those that are actually are genuine issues that genuine errors that and aren't in any way related to the settings that have been applied. So I'm trying to come up with a lot of this has been fed back. So there's been examples that have come into us from various channels that we've collated and we've put them through to the dev team. I'm open to having more really. There's one particular one where certain users are experiencing where you're getting 0% figures on battery SOC, so MinSoc on grid, off grid, minimum SOC. So that's identified as an issue that we were investigating. So hopefully there will be a fix for that shortly. There's other common ones that we've seen that again have been passed on, but then alongside those ones where we can see a pattern, there's a huge amount of noise. A lot of it is actually to do with people not understanding what the functions are, what they do, and how to set them. Again, that's on us to make that clearer. I get that, but it's so please, apologies to those that are experiencing these issues and feel like we're not listening or that they're not getting a response. Just have to bear in mind that the number of incoming inquiries we have daily is significant of various things, anything from really basic questions to critical issues with systems to these app issues, and we're just trying to manage that as best we can and collate together the issues that seem to have a be common. So we do hear you, and we are reacting. So there is work going on a couple of known issues. I've mentioned one. There's a couple of other ones that hopefully we'll have fixes for in the near future, and then others we're trying our best to sort through the mass of inquiries we get to try and identify if there are broader issues here. In terms of the error messaging, I totally accept that, and I think I've made that point internally that the messages are often meaningless. There's no way of discerning what's the issue. It's a randomized message with an error code. What does it mean? I think if you ask half the people here, they don't know what those mean. Those messages mean a lot of the time. So that needs to improve. The whole reporting, the whole way that those things are displayed, the guides that we produce, particularly for things like the mode scheduler. There are some changes to that coming. For example, I'll give you one example. Within the mode scheduler, you can set force charge, force discharge events. Now, within the force discharge, you have the option of setting force discharge minimum SOC or force discharge power. Makes sense.
Yep.
It's a feature that's specific to that function. If you set a force charge event, those features still appear. Those options still appear, and people assume that they have meaning and do something, and they don't. They shouldn't appear. Little things like that we can improve the user interface. So if you select a force charge event, those grey out. They're not relevant.
Yeah.
Don't set them. But yeah, that's part of the evolution of the app and things that we're looking to improve to make that user interface more intuitive and easier to follow.
That makes sense. And speaking of tons of apps and updates, I've seen this question asked in a few different ways, but I'll grab it off of YouTube. So Paul Martin's asking about an update for mode scheduling support for the H3 Pro.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Paul himself actually, or somebody raised that on the group, and I came back with an update to say mid-October. I've had it confirmed today that that's still on schedule. I was told 7 to 10, so, excuse me, 7 to 10 days from today, that will be available. So
Oh,
it is
awesome.
coming.
That's a great update. So that's coming. Just scanning the list, trying to get the ones that I've got as many. The people that have asked in priority order, I suppose. So another one. A lot of people are asking questions about the V2 app. So obviously we've had first preview etc. of a lot of the features whilst it was going through its initial sort of beta development. Do you recommend users to move to the V2 if they're currently looking at their phone and it's got the version 1 on it? And are there any upcoming features that are worth noting at the moment?
I would recommend they move across anyway. I think it's mature enough now that you wouldn't. There's no particular reason why you would stick with version 1, notwithstanding the fact that there are some users that are experiencing issues, as we just alluded to, which um, will be resolved in time. Um, there's a lot of work going on with the app with regard to sort of some of the new products. So microinverters. Um, Obviously, that's an altogether different thing, with a microinverter, and that development is largely done. In fact, I think if you go into the app and go into the demo link at the bottom of the login screen, you can drop in the drop down. You can see an EV charger site. Those demo sites need a bit of work actually, because um, they're not great demos. But the sorry, not the EV charger, the microinverter option does give you an insight into what that will look like and how you can drill down into each panel for its performance and yield, etc. Work to integrate the new next generation of EV chargers, and various sort of improvements on that. Heat pumps as well will get incorporated into the app once they're released, which is not that far away as well. Some user interface tweaks, the things we've already spoken about, um, with making things clearer in terms of messaging and alerts. Um, minor things that probably aren't even worth mentioning that will happen. Bug fixes, obviously, there are a few of those to resolve as well. So there'll be updates to the app rolled out over time. I'm not aware of anything significant that be relevant actually. Um, I think that things like the parallel mode, in particularly with the three-phase inverters, in terms of how that's displayed, for a more intuitive plant-based whole system display. Um, the Gmax, obviously, that there's work going on with the Gmax as well. There's going to have to be work on that. So there's lots of ongoing stuff really that's happening with the app that will be rolled out over the course of the next sort of 3 to 6 months. I'm just trying to think. There probably is a couple of nice, unique features that I've forgotten that probably would have been of interest, but I'd have to follow up on that because my brain's a bit fried today. It's been a long day.
Yeah, no worries at all. There's a number of questions around the Octopus Agile integration. I've noticed if there seems to be a mixed bag of people. Some people are struggling to set it up or unsure how to set it up, and when they do enable Agile mode, that they seem to be getting unexpected results with it. Sometimes charging when it shouldn't, or when they is this configuration error, or is it an up to date user manuals needed, or is there still a bit of teething issues going on with the Octopus integration?
Don't know. This is a big head scratcher for me because I know that people are using it without trouble, and then we have people say this that they can't get it to
Mm.
work at all. And what happens is they contact us, and it's very difficult for us to test. And what I would say to people, especially those people that have created tickets that, and I'm sure there's some here that have, and are getting frustrated with what they perceive to be a lack of response. The more information you can pass to us, the better. Screenshots, screen records, um, anything you can provide us that tries to help us understand what's going on, because it seems to be clear that while some people are using it without any issue, others are having major problems, or as in the case of this question, can't get it to work at all. We need to try and get to the bottom of it. It's a priority for us. So I'm inviting people really to contact us. Some people, if it's at all possible, if you're able to outline exactly what's happening and provide us as much information as possible, even if you're prepared to, in some cases, share your login credentials with us. We'd only do that with your permission, explicitly. And, we've had one or two users that have been prepared to do that and give us a temporary password, simply in order to emulate what you're seeing. Because often when we get these things reported, we can't repeat the issue. We're going in through a different avenue. We're not going in as an end user. So by enabling us to go in as you, in effect, it has helped with other issues. As okay, well, now we can see what the issue is. So there are issues clearly, but they're not fully understood because they're not universal. They don't apply to everybody, and we're not quite sure what. This is me being honest. We're struggling to understand what the issue is.
I wonder
And
if
this
it
is
could even be tariff related, because I've used the Octopus integration. I've got a daytime and a nighttime rate. Plug the API details in, hit the button, and then turn it on to, effectively I set the buy sell thresholds between cheap power and expensive power, and no issues at all. But I wonder, because not the variables in this are what system type and configuration, but also could even the data that Octopus is sending you about the tariff, have quirks, etc. So I appreciate how complicated it may be.
well, yeah, you've kind of nailed it in that sense, because what we're trying to, is trying to see a pattern. Is it specific models? Is it specific firmware levels? Is there some pattern here that, and it's quite difficult to establish that with the information that we get, because quite often what we'll get is a ticket raised by an end user, and it will simply say Agile doesn't work, please advise, um, which is fine, but then starts a long conversation that, if you can provide us with specific example, and some people watching this will say that they have, and I appreciate that, and if they have, then those things would have been passed on. But yeah, it can be difficult sometimes, because a lot of it, we have had a few cases with these reports when we've looked into it, it was user input. um, it was people playing with the settings within the schedule, post them, those schedules being set and stuff like that, that has just taken things out of range. And um, yeah, so yeah, it's a bit of a non-answer, unfortunately, because I think people probably are expecting something a bit more precise from me. But just to let people know, we are aware that there are issues. We do need information. We do need examples, and then we can look into these cases and try and identify, uh, if there is a pattern, where it is, and what the root cause is.
Awesome. We're getting to that time of the year as well, where the temperatures start to cool off and obscure. Why is my battery not charging, not discharging? Type things happen. I've seen a lot of, um, even now. We just got into October. Even now, it's starting. It's getting cold. The behaviour I'm observing is changing. But
Yep.
something that I spotted a few times that's also appeared on the questions, is around some kind of, again, a good reason to maybe not upgrade firmware. New BMS firmware has particularly changed the algorithm of what temperature depicts what charging amperage. Have you got any thoughts on this, Craig?
Which battery is this? Is this
If
linked
you're
to
on the, yeah, that's a good question. They haven't actually said the actual system type. If you're on watching the live stream, if you wouldn't mind, or if you know of the type of hardware, please comment. But yeah, V2 batteries, HV2600s, are
V2 HV?
apparently behaving differently after the firmware update, and are current limiting faster at higher temperatures is being observed. Is that right, Brian? I can see you, and Dave, you're on there. Give me a thumbs up on the comment if I'm getting that across correctly. Might be one we follow up on as well,
Yeah,
Craig.
if you could get hold of a specific serial number, um, of a system that's had a firmware update and this change was observed post the update, I can look into that as a priority to try and understand what's going on there. Wasn't aware of that
Perfect. Yeah, no, yeah,
individual.
Brian. I can see Brian's giving quite a good example because he's got historical data. You can see the
Perfect.
before firmware update, after firmware update. There seems to be a different charge curve being applied. So I'll follow up with you,
Okay.
Brian, and get those details over to Craig and see if we, again, maybe deliberate, may actually be, a mistake in the latest version, and that's sort of part of the reason why some of these updates need to
Yeah, if it's
bed in a
deliberate,
little
I'm
bit.
not aware of it, so I'd be very interested to see that data. Yeah, for sure.
And the trouble is because it's affecting the charge amperage. Obviously, if you have smaller, fewer HV2600s in a battery stack, you get impacted more. If you've got a full stack, you reduce the amperage a little bit. You don't tend to notice the charge discharge performance affecting. But if you're the worst case scenario, you've got one BMS and two HV2600s. You're the smallest end of the battery voltage size, and you potentially half your amperage. You're going to notice the. I think in one example I saw it was struggling to discharge above 2 kilowatts as an example, and then you start to notice that because house loads of 2 kilowatts are quite normal. If you've got an oven, a kettle, a hob on, so it's
Presumably as
but
well,
it
Will, in that example you gave, the individual had obviously delved quite deep into the data, because I think one of the things that isn't clear to everybody is that you get a battery temperature reading on the app. Um, it's an average temperature of the battery. Okay, it's the the charge rates are determined by the lowest cell voltage that's reported. So if you've got one cell that's a little bit out of sync, but it might be a couple of degrees below that. So that's something that not everybody's aware of, and you can only see that by doing a data export to actually see the individual, to actually the cell temperature, rather, the charge or discharge current has reacted to. So there can sometimes be a bit of confusion on that.
makes sense. Yeah. So the BMS is looking at the worst state, the
Yes.
colder cell to form its charge current.
Yep. Which
Yeah,
might be a bit lower than the overall reported average battery temperature, if you like. So there was potential for that little slight discrepancy.
perfect. I haven't been able to validate it, but someone mentioned that the Myra, the LV50 to the LV54 have been removed from the UK Fox website. Does that mean they're discontinued?
It's it's naturally given the move to, with the installation guidelines and regulatory changes, that we will move away from that type of battery um, going forward. That's not to say that there aren't ample stocks of those at the moment for expansion. There are the Myras, and B, that we will obviously support them for the full life of the warranty, and therefore will have warranty replacements. What I would say to anybody that's got a Myra HV25, if they're considering expanding, probably do it sooner rather than later. That's always good advice, anyway, for anybody that's got a battery system. Don't wait too long to add those batteries. Do it as soon as is feasibly possible. Notwithstanding budgetary issues and stuff like that. You certainly don't want to be expanding your system beyond 2 years, in my view. Okay, even that's not a rule or in any way written down by Fox. It's just good practice to try and do it within the first 2 years. Um, Myras will continue to be supported. There's still stock available, still being sold, still new systems being spec with them. But obviously, in terms of our sort of our output from a marketing perspective and what we show on the website, that there will be a gradual sort of removal of those as we move forward. LV52s, there's still stock available through certain distributors. Um, Again, they will be supported for expansion where possible, and for RMA should that ever that be needed. Um, and you're covered under the warranty anyway for the full duration. But again, there'll probably be a move away from that product. Um, I don't think it's in our long-term plans to continue to develop it, even though it's still current. Um, and when any product goes end of life, there is a period beyond that which it will still be available for expansion.
Sure, yeah, of course. So if you're sat there thinking, right, well, I know I need to scale my batteries. Scale now, and if I suppose there's the option of, well, if you want to jump to sort of the latest generation, if you've got a very small battery stack and you want to scale because you realise that your needs are far larger than your initial installation capacity, then you've got a good opportunity to sell your current battery stack on the used market and potentially upgrade to something like the ECS cubes or the EP range, which are the flagship products that Fox are continuing to develop. But I appreciate that Fox have got the backing full of the warranty. You've got all that stock for RMAs, etc. And it is your situation hasn't changed as a customer from the day it was installed. You've still got the same cover and support. However, if there's an option to scale them, you can scale your existing system or potentially invest. I know some folks on the group have been able to go from HV2600s to the EP11s, and the gap difference in what they're selling their used equipment for isn't that much less. So the upgrade's actually quite affordable, and you get a nicer unit from a cosmetics and a form factor perspective. So you've really got the best of all worlds when it comes to your expansion choice. This isn't a unique thing to Fox. I mean, if you look at anyone, Give Energy, Alpha, they've all got generations of hardware that are slowly phasing out, and newer equipment's coming in, things like that. At least with Fox, any high voltage battery works with any of their inverter range. So you haven't got to. One of the questions I noticed was about an updated list of what batteries to what inverter. I think there's a little bit of confusion over the maximum number of some of the older batteries, like the HVs. If you're on a H1 versus a H1 Gen 2 and things like that. But the manuals and the documentation will be updated in time, right, Craig?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, just a final point on those two particular products that have been mentioned. Our hand was forced. It wasn't something we were planning to do in the short term, but obviously we had to react to the changes to regulations that say that had minimum ratings on enclosures, um, rules around exposed cabling. So what you've got with the Myra is a very good battery. The battery cells in the Myras are exceptionally high quality battery cells. So even though the price per kilowatt hour of that system is less than the Energy Cube, it's in no way an inferior product in terms of its cell quality. That they're equivalent. Um, but obviously, and we were running with that quite happily. But obviously, then there was a change to the landscape in terms of the regulation. So we had to adjust and say, well, if it's the case that installations increasingly have got to go outdoors, that there can't be any exposed cabling, even though they comply with MCS in terms of they can't be removed, etc. Without use of tools and all those other caveats that it ticked every box in that sense. The general trend is away from that, so we've got to react to that. And there's no point in continuing to manufacture in large numbers a product that we may 18 months from now it may not even be possible to install as a new install. It's not going to affect historic installs; they'll still be fine, but anything new. So we had to make that decision. The same applies with the LV52. It's not an IP65 battery, so again we're in the same situation where that would have to be completely redeveloped in order to make it compliant with the requirements to go outdoors. So our hand was forced on that a little bit to maybe bring forward the phasing out of those quicker than we probably otherwise would have done. But they are still current now as of today, and they will be supported ongoing. And your warranty is your warranty, so please don't worry about that. On
Awesome.
the question you actually asked me, which is about the battery config, pairing V1, V2s, etc. Uh, I've made the point that we need to produce a much clearer guide to that, which we published, that makes it much easier to follow. I think there are third parties that have done this. I think the Eco Supermarket have got on their website, they've got a nice breakdown of this. Well, actually, probably we should have done, but they've done it, and we do point people in that direction now and again to look at that. But that's something we are working on to make that available publicly. A lot of it's, to be honest with you, is awaiting the new website. There will at some point in the not too distant future, be a completely overhauled web presence, and a lot of new content will be added then, and new um, um, support documentation, videos will be published that are easier to find and navigate and find your way through.
And on the sort of scaling factor, Anthony Sharp's commented that he's been running 4 Mira HV25s for over 30 months, running faultlessly. Is it too late to expand? You mentioned 2 years. I know that I've seen some snippets say ideally within a year, but I know there's not a hard and fast rule, but is there a best practice?
Yeah, I mean, that example there, I would say is okay. I think once you dip below the 90% state of health, I think then you're into the realms of probably not doing it. So 2 years is, and that's pretty much in line with what we'd expect to see after 30 months, to be honest. Sort of 93,
Yeah.
94%. Maybe you can get some a bit lower, some a bit higher, depending on, it depends on how they've been utilized, how much throughput has gone through those batteries in that time. Of course, there's lots of variables there, but that would be okay. I wouldn't have any concerns if he wanted to add a battery at 93% SOH, it'd be fine.
And the shortest, the thing going on behind the scenes that's kind of depicting this is, well, the cells are aging through natural degradation as you charge and discharge them, and if you add new batteries, say a 5-year-old system, you will have the capacity, because as you charge those cells, they'll only charge to the highest, to the lowest voltage of the worst performing cell. Hence, while it will all work, if you were to scale them in future beyond the advice, it will still work, but you'll effectively be limiting the performance or the capacity to that of the worst cell. So you'd be wasting money scaling a very worn system. Is that fair to say?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So if you go to year 6 and you're adding a battery, you're not going to get anything. You're not going to get the full benefit of the battery. Your benefit is much of that's taken away. So that's the reason. So that's why it's not a rule, and it's not like it's just making people understand, if you do have a system that has degraded a little bit over time, that the new battery you're adding, you're not going to get necessarily the full 100% of that from day one. It's going to have to be acknowledged that there's going to be a little bit of a limited output from that battery.
Absolutely. I suppose the simplest way I've seen it summarized is, if you've bought a new car and you've driven it for a year and you get a puncture, you could probably just replace that one tire. But if you're 2.5 years down the road and you want to balance that wear effectively, because other things start to happen, so that the same process is happening at a chemical level in the battery. And what I suppose you're trying to avoid, Craig, is customers scaling years into the future and saying, my batteries aren't performing as well as I expect them to.
Exactly right. Yeah, this is exactly the point, which is why we have that guidance. So you've nailed it there, really. That's our concern on a commercial level.
Just 3 questions left, then we will let you let you end your day. Got a question coming in about the EPS box for 3-phase. Someone is struggling to find one. Is it still a product that's accessible? Would that be the way to go if you're considering an EPS solution? It looks like they've got 2 12-kilowatt H3s.
You're asking the wrong person on supply. I was led to believe that there is stock of the so it would depend on who they've approached. I'm pretty sure there is. If not here, then certainly we have stock within Europe, and therefore, should there be a demand for it, we'd bring them in. So, don't know for sure is my answer, but it is a product that is available. It is current. It's whether or not it may be that, and again, I can't confirm 100%. We just haven't got them on the ground in the UK right now, but there may be some on the way. So that would just need to be followed up. Depending on who you buy through, I don't know if it's an installer or end user asking that question. I assume it's an installer.
I think it's installed, yeah.
Yeah, if they would go, if they approach their distributor and say, "Can you contact Fox?" Maybe they've already done that. Um, they can even mention my name, and I can intervene and see if I can sort of find out what's going on there.
And there's not a single phase product of the same idea, is there?
Not yet. There's one coming.
Oh, brilliant.
So there's going to be a EPS gateway single phase in development, likely to be available early next year. Initially, there'll be one developed for the new Power Cube. Okay, so just want to make that clear. That will be the priority, is a whole house backup gateway for the Power Cube initially, the new
Okay.
all-in-one, and then beyond that, there should be one available for the rest of the single phase products. This one, though, I wasn't aware that there was an outage on it in terms of stock, but obviously it's something I need to follow up on. So I'm sorry, I can't give them an answer right now.
No worries. And you mentioned about the Power Cube again. That's just reminded me that someone asked a question about. They've noticed that the EQS, or sorry, the ECS 4800 is now called an EQ. Is it the same product, or is that a different product with a very similar name?
Yeah, so the EQ 4800 was renamed based on the fact it needed to go through certification again. Okay, so we defined it differently. It's essentially the same product as the ECS 4800. Okay, you can install them together. You can have a stack of some ECS 4800s and some EQs, so that they are essentially the same product. However, one of the benefits of the EQ is obviously you could stack the additional 2 batteries. So previously it was a 1 master 6 slave limit on a stack, whereas with the EQ you can go to 1 master 8 slaves 9. If you want to have a stack of 9, they have to all be EQ versions of that battery.
Right.
That's the EQ 4800. Now, in terms of the new EQs that are coming in, the 29s and the 43, which I've referenced, that will be paired most commonly with the Power Cube for outdoor installation. They're part of the same family as the EQ 4800 in terms of its voltage and certain other things, but they will have the heater in. The EQ won't initially, okay, because there is stock in the system. Okay, so obviously once that's through, at some point in the future, there'll be a battery of that size that will be an EQ model, which will have the heater built in. So just to clarify, it's confusing, I know. EQ 2900, 43 are new. They're coming in. They will work across all of our products, like all of our other batteries. They will have internal heaters built in. EQ 4800 is current, doesn't have the internal temperature control, but again can be used with all our products. ECS 4800's EQs could be mixed. So yeah, there is going to be an EQ 5000 as well, which I don't know what to throw that into the mix. So that I think that's further down the line as well. So there's going to be new variants of the Energy Cube family that we release as we add in new functionality, new features. So hopefully I've summarized that in a way that people understand. I haven't confused everybody, but
yeah. And so it is different, but you can mix them. But if you want to full stack maximum capacity, you have to have the same model up for the full stack.
Yes.
But there is some cross compatibility if if you're scaling etc. You can only find EQs 4800s. You can add to an existing ECS 4800, but you can't go to the full number of cubes. Yeah.
Because a lot of people out there will have ECS 4800s thinking, I want to add a battery. All they're seeing is EQs on the market. Yes, you can. You can add one of those to the stack, no problem.
Perfect. I can combine 2 questions into one. So both Dave Foster and Fons on 2008, they've asked questions around the cloud data. So Dave's asking about the poll rate. I think is defaulted to it. It sends a pulse every 5 minutes of data up to the Fox cloud. And the second sort of side of that by Vonson is noticed that data from before November 2023 appears to have gone missing in the cloud. What are your thoughts on the 5 minute poll, and if you're aware of any data being purged, either deliberately or accidentally, on the cloud?
Not aware of the second one. That would possibly need to be raised with us as an issue to investigate. That shouldn't happen. On the first question, so there is going to be a change here. So the main data sets will always be 5 minutes. Okay. However, there will be 10-second polling for updates to the energy flow. So people aren't waiting 5 minutes between for updates. As you're well aware, that can sometimes create a bit of confusion. You know, that sort of the data polls at the precise moment somebody puts on the kettle, and it's suddenly, you know, there's the reaction time that, you know, I'm drawing 3 kilowatts from the grid, and they're looking at that for 5 minutes when of course they're not. It was a momentary phase change, but it will go to 10 seconds. So there'll be frequent updates to the energy flow in real time, but the main sets of data that sit behind that will still poll every 5 minutes. That's the plan. That's not that far away. Probably should have mentioned that when you're asking me about app updates. Actually, that's on the agenda.
Yeah, that makes sense, because people really they want the energy graph flow to be as responsive as possible. But if you're reporting over a day, hey, 5 minute increments is great. It's great for
Yeah,
that. Anything narrower than that, actually, I think you just get a bunch of noise. Right, the graph is a bit messy.
yeah,
So
it's going to be
yeah,
big peaks and troughs. Yeah.
no, well that's great. I think we got around to as many of the questions as we could. I really appreciate your time, Craig. I know you're still, you've been out all last week at Solar and Storage, and then, so I appreciate your time putting this together and answering these questions and learning about some of the new products. Hope everyone online appreciates what's been shared, and thanks again. We'll set one up in the next quarter.
If we're still live, Will, are we?
We are still live.
Just want to add a couple of things in.
Sure.
I think somebody had asked about the new version 2 portal. That's scheduled for early December. Okay, so there'll be a brand new user interface for the Fox Cloud. Okay, so at the moment you might see some incremental changes to that. What you're actually going to see when it's renewed is a complete new interface. So it will all change. New visuals, new data sets, improvements, things that have been highlighted in the past that aren't quite, what people would expect to see in terms of PV generation charts, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, just to mention that is still being worked on.
So that's the desktop version, is it?
Desktop version, yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Any other thoughts, or we close the feed down? Cool. Getting lots of applauses and thumbs up from the live users. So yep, thank you everyone. Thanks for spending your evening with us. Have a great rest of your time. Hit the button.